myself and Evelyn is kind of go over the next steps on as to what we're going to be doing after today, this afternoon, and going forward. So I just kind of use some of the slides from our old presentation just to kind of refresh some different pieces, again, about our goals, vision, mission for niche, and of course the health system's mission. Again, this is the steering committee that was originally designed to how we're going to do spread all this education across the continuum. And going back and looking at our GAP results, these results were taken from the survey here at the hospital, what we actually learned through our GAP results and how we're going to apply that to moving forward. So what we really found was up at the top is the best possible score, the middle is neither good or bad, and the bottom is poor. And these are about several topics that were some of the main focus of the GAP. And as you can tell, our attitude, and again, this was the results from the hospital's GAP scores, but the attitude in many of the areas was best possible score. But the knowledge was low in almost every area. So we were glad to see that the attitude was good, because without a good attitude and a willingness to have more knowledge, we'd be in worse shape. But we have recognized that the education piece is what is really lacking, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish through this initiative. Talking a little bit about the geriatric care environment, the aging sensitive care delivery, institutional values regarding older adults and staff, resource availability, and capacity for collaboration. I'll make sure you guys have all these slides if you'd like to have them. These were some of our scores, again, about the care delivery, the value regarding older adults, resource availability, and capacity for collaboration. We had 178 participants take the survey, and how we ranked in comparison to peer hospitals and all hospitals. Perception of professional issues was another topic on the GAP. Staff disagreement about treatment of geriatric syndromes, staff, family, and patient disagreement, use of geriatric services, perceived legal vulnerability to legal action, and intensity and burden of behavioral problems. That was the perception of professional issues section. And again, those were our scores in that area. So ranking of 0 to 10, 0 is best and 10 is worse. That's how we ranked at Walter Reed with these scores right here. So in the open comment section of the GAP, what this is, these words, it's called a wordle, and you take the number of times each word is in the comment section. Every time we read that word in the comment section, you count how many times that word is mentioned. You put that in an equation to kind of have a visual idea of the biggest issue that was mentioned. So what would help improve care of older adults? The number one, and by a long shot, was training. And that's what the staff felt like would be help to improve the care. And these were some issues that raised the most reactions. Restraints, medication management, training, pressure ulcers. Most pressing issue currently facing our older adults here at Walter Reed, hospital-acquired delirium was mentioned, handover more than anything else, and overuse of medications. So this was kind of our journey. This is where we've been, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we're going. So we're about a year into this, really looking at the whole from the start of the GAP through today, forming the steering committee, doing the GAP, looking at the results, holding the first class, developing the educational plan. So we've really got a lot to do, and we've done a lot already. So where do we go from here?
Question.
Yes.
That's a very good question.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a question. So, what our plan is for today and moving forward is that we really need to have 2 8-hour educational / prep days. Today being day 1. Day 2 would be September the 11th. Okay, same time, same place. We are going to divide everyone who's here into 4 groups, and the groups are going to be mixed with all disciplines, between CNAs and the RNs and LPNs, and from each facility. So we're making sure that we are going to provide the education that will be suited at each facility, and we're going to work on the following topics. End of life care. We have Carol Wilson is coming this afternoon to help us with that. Pressure ulcers, medications, and delirium. And so the whole concept, and this is kind of hard to wrap your head around a little bit, is that today this afternoon we'll be in our groups and we're going to work on this education material. But what we have to remember is that these projects are going to move throughout the health system, throughout the Middle Peninsula. So today, if Group 1 is working on delirium, and Group 2 medications, and Group 3 pressure ulcers, and 4 end-of-life care, if you look at that chart that Heather passed out, this is the plan for how these projects will move through the Middle Peninsula. Okay, so delirium will start here at Walter Reed because that's something we've been working on for quite a while. So delirium will stay here from September 11th through October the 24th. At the same time the delirium is here, medications will be in, project will be in Matthews, end of life care will be in Saluda, and wound care will be in West Point. Okay? At those facilities, the role that we will each play is it'll be our job to educate the staff that are there on that project, whether it's through unit meetings or one-on-one education time, whatever that may be. I think here at Walter Reed we'll use unit meetings through the different departments because we have each department represented here. And then the project will physically move from West Point. So Walter Reed's project will move from delirium. Delirium will then next go to Matthews. If you can follow that, okay. The concept is that by the time we're finished with this, we would have educated, and I'm not sure the exact number, but I would say hundreds of people on these topics by just spending 2 days developing the materials. But what we have to remember is that we have to make sure that the education suits every facility and where it's going to be, and that it can be, we have to incorporate the CNA, GPCA curriculum as well as the GRN curriculum in each project. So, any questions about that? Does that make sense to you guys?
Now, as the project moves, the educators move with their project?
No. So at the end of day 2, each group will present their project on how they're going to, how they best think the education should be presented. And Heather's going to go into that in great detail. But so if Group 1 has worked on delirium and this is how they want that presented, on day 2, the rest of the group will hear that presentation, understand that, so when delirium reaches your facility, you've understood how it's to be taught. It's the same material that we all will have. It should be nothing new, just one certain group is going to work on it.
Janet, can I ask a question?
Sure.
That's great. And one of the things I'd ask on that education and more about making aware is to make your medical staffs aware that this curriculum is going on.
Okay.
And I just want to say something from the medical side.
Absolutely.
Is, you know, the slide that you showed about attitude and
Mhm,
knowledge?
mhm.
Understand that physician knowledge will be at the same level.
They were a part of our GAP, actually.
Right. So don't think that physicians actually have the knowledge that you're going to have around older adult care. So you have to, the physicians and APPs may not participate, but I think with one-page flyers, or maybe you can think about it in the hospital about and think about it, how we're going to do that through the facilities, to say, niche is coming to you, here's what niche means, here's what we're working on, here's the purpose, here's the goals, here's the curriculum, if you want more information, here's the link, or here's the
Right.
materials.
Absolutely.
Because I think if you go forward without bringing the other team members along, then it's just sitting in nursing. And sometimes there will be, the nurses will create a recommendation to the physicians, and the physicians go, what are you talking about?
To
Right.
that point, Dr. Allen, we were just talking about it intersecting the delirium project, and we're doing the CIS and we're doing the new disc, but the physicians aren't always entirely receptive.
I was just talking to Jill about that.
Good, so we all.
Well, no, I'm glad that you brought it up, because I've been working on that, and I've talked to Dr. Arnold. I've asked to get in front of the physicians. I'll be a physician champion. I'll be a physician educator about delirium, and that's exactly what you're experiencing is exactly what I was trying to avoid. And so in that, you have to plan when you go forward to educate your medical staff, APPs, and physicians as you go along. That's all
Right.
I'm saying.
No, I appreciate that, any input that any of you guys have, because this is something that Heather and Gaynor and I have kind of envisioned, but we're not really sure how it's going to work. I mean, to be perfectly honest, you know, the whole concept is that we're going to spread this education across the Middle Peninsula, but we're going to have to regroup and say what worked, what didn't work. This is something that Niche has never done, and so we're going to do our best to do our best at it. So, but as we go through any of this, and you find that you have questions or insight how we could do something different, please don't hesitate to speak up, because you know, we're new at this also, so we're just trying to figure our way through this. Did you have a question?
Just tell them that there's reason PACE isn't on there, but we're gonna talk about it.
Yes, PACE and home health are not on here, but we have a plan for PACE and home health. Some of that's due to locality where you guys are, but we will we'll talk just a little bit about that also. So that's kind of where we envision this to go. You'll notice this is 6 weeks. These time frames are 6 weeks, and the reason for that is because, especially here at the hospital, to get these projects through every unit, it's going to take probably about 6 weeks between the OR, the ER, the ICU, and med-surg. And so we thought 6 weeks would be a good time frame for each project to stay at each location. Okay? All right. Oops. Okay, Ethelyn? Yep. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ethelyn? I'm not sure that it...
We did at the beginning.
Okay,
Yes.
that's right.
But hello again. I'm one of the representatives from, I just have the one
Okay,
slide,
okay.
from PACE. And so if you remember the couple of slides that we had back earlier that talked about all of the issues that all of us that you identified in doing your GAP, well, they cross every strata. So it's not just in the hospital, it's not just in home health, it's not just in long-term care. It actually happens everywhere. So for that reason, we want to be sure that as you are breaking up into your groups, that we are here for you, the team. And so when you said, where do we go from here? We wanted you to know you probably have some questions in the back of your mind, just like we had questions in the back of our mind. So we wanted to give you a little bit of guidance. Number one, you will have the niche steering committee. So everybody who's sitting along the sides of the wall, we are here for you, because we know you will have questions. And we know you might have times where you want to throw your hands up and say, there is no way. I've had a bad day. I've had all these patients at the hospital. I've had all these home care assignments. I'm barely dragging out of the door to punch out of Kronos to go home. Can you tell we've been where you are? So, but the education will be critical so that when you go back into that scenario, you will be the champion and you will say, we can do this. So, please be sure we will give you all of our phone numbers. Call us, text us, email us, stop us in the hallway. We are here, okay? Everybody on that committee. Your department managers. Now, this is where you're going to be, the census is high. Am I really going to have some time to work on my project? So we are going to help you begin to develop negotiation skills. You know, how many of you have children? Okay, how many of you have husbands or significant others? Okay, so you are already negotiating every day. Okay, you want to go out to dinner tonight and you do not want to cook? You are going to negotiate, whether you have money or not, right? So, use those skills with your department managers because this is very important for us to deliver excellent quality care. So when you leave here today, we've already had some discussion with them, but we need you to go back and say, look at my group assignment. How can we make this happen? Now you don't want to say, I went to class today and they told me that you have to give me 8 hours next week. That probably is not going to work because then they will be calling Janet and Gaynor and everyone else and saying, what did you tell them in that classroom? So we want this to be a win-win situation. So please sit down and come up with a game plan. But this chart will be a big help for them to be able to see what the game plan is. Education team members, we already told you they're coming from Lifelong Health. So that's all of us here in the room. Definitely from Walter Reed, from PACE. So again, you will have a phone tree with all of our information. We are not going to leave you out there in the wilderness. No. So we will be having monthly checkpoints with you. So you will either hear from Heather, from Janet, as long as she doesn't go into labor. But you'll hear from us. We'll call you, we'll text you, email you and say, how are things going? Do you have a bump in the road? Please let us know. And no question is a silly question. Many of us have spent years still attempting to become good educators. Have lots of education, and some of us still don't get it. So we don't expect you to become an educator overnight. So please call us, no question. If you're saying, I'm trying to develop an objective, which we're going to talk about a little bit later today, and we will say to you, an objective starts with a verb. You'll say a verb. I remember something about that when I was in elementary school, but it's been a while, okay? That's a fair question, okay? So please call us. And then in November, and we don't have a date as of yet, we are all going to come back together because if you look at your calendar, November is about the midpoint. And so we want to have you all come back together and tell us what's working, what's not working. This will be a safe place because we probably won't have any managers here that day, and Janet will be away on, maternity leave. So you can tell us what they said to you or didn't say to you. So that'll be our time to come back and hug each other and see what we can do better, okay? So hopefully this will set the stage to let you know that we are your support in all things. Even if it's just a day that you need to call on the phone and cry. It will happen. We're just getting you ready. But in the end, it's all about, look at the niche sign. In the end, it's all about our commitment. And so because we're committed, and again, any of us that have significant other children, at the end of the day, even when they drive us crazy, we're still committed, right? And so we want to have the same commitment for our seniors, and that's why we're going to be here for you. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Heather. If you don't know me well, I'm here at Walter Reed. I do staff development. I am one of the educators that unfortunately the people at Walter Reed have to see almost all the time. So I'm going to be helping you to just try to get this idea in your head about how this whole education piece is going to look, how it's going to feel to you, and how we can make something happen that you're going to feel very natural and very comfortable delivering at your facilities. And so it's a little bit mind-blowing right now to some of you who maybe haven't done this before, but I promise you, just as Evelyn said, we are not going to leave you alone. We're going to give you lots and lots of support. We've made this as easy and painless for you as we possibly can. And the niche network and the whole niche community is really set up so that a lot of this is done for you, and it's going to be pretty painless, I promise. So don't freak out. You can definitely do this. You don't have to be an educator by trade. You don't have to be someone with tons of experience. You just have to care. And you're not going to be left alone through any of this process. You are going to be put into teams, and Janet and the rest of the group has really worked hard to make sure that everyone's team is full of lots of different kinds of people with lots of experience and working at different facilities. So you're all going to bring a very valuable piece to your team. And so you're going to really have to work together. And nurses and CNAs are really teamwork people. I mean, you all know about that and the importance of that from day one. So I don't feel like I have to necessarily tell you, but I do want to tell you as an educator, you may not be very comfortable. So the important thing to know about being an educator is to know yourself. Know what kind of person you are. Do you like to get up and talk in front of people that you don't know well? Do you prefer to stay behind and do something like create a puzzle or a game? Are you very one-on-one? Do you prefer to chat with your counterparts and have discussions about case studies rather than lecture and perform a PowerPoint presentation? That's going to be important to know before you start setting out to design something. We aren't going to ask you to do something that feels like it's completely foreign to you. In your team, you're going to want to start getting to know each other. You guys are going to be working together until March, and this is going to be an important communication process. You're going to be communicating with people who aren't in the same facility you are all the time. So you're going to have to reach out by phone, email, or meet in person on odd times to try to get things done. And that's going to require coming out and communicating. So get comfortable with each other. Make sure that whatever we're doing here, we do with respect. Not only for the patients who ultimately will be caring for and the coworkers that you'll be training, but for each other. I really want you to be prepared for feedback. Some people are going to throw out ideas and brainstorm, and that's wonderful. And respectfully, you're going to hear some things like, no, I just can't do that. And it's okay. Just be prepared for everyone to bring their strengths and their weaknesses together and share those ideas and really try to get some kind of cohesive unit together. So part of being a team is really figuring out how are you going to make decisions. I really want for all of the groups to designate a leader, not necessarily someone who makes the team's decisions for you. You can vote on your decisions or come to a consensus in some way after discussion, obviously. But we do want someone that you might designate as a spokesperson or someone to make sure they collect some of the paperwork and sort of take that lead position. Not necessarily having any more power than another person in the group, but being responsible for some of the pieces. So I do want you to kind of decide amongst yourself who that person will be. I want you to do that before you leave today. So we will have some goals that I want you to accomplish by the end of the day before you leave. And we'll go more into that in a little bit. Conflict, what happens if you can't reach consensus? So you're voting and you have 4 people in a group and 2 people want one thing and 2 people want the other. Well, again, as nurses, you know how to work very well, negotiate, as Evelyn was talking about, and make everyone have a win-win situation. And that's really what we want to make sure happens. And again, you'll have your educators and your subject matter experts here with you for this afternoon and for day 2, and then available by phone or email throughout the process of getting us from here to September 11th. So be sure to reach out because we can probably help with those things as well. Commitment, be honest about what you can give to this group. If you had just had a baby and you have a toddler at home, be honest about that. Okay, I may not be the person to be responsible for driving this to Matthews. My mother lives right by the nursing home and I can go there on my way anyway, so I would be glad to be that person. So be sure to share what you can bring and what you can't. If you're not able to do something, just be honest about that. We don't want to get to the end of this project and find out someone overcommitted and they really couldn't get something done because someone else in your group probably can. We do want you to think about a schedule. I have a set of goals I want you to meet by the end of today. That will sort of help get you on your course to be done by September 11th. There may be some things that you have to do outside of this group before you come back on September 11th, the second day of our meeting. And that may involve setting some smaller priorities and some goals along the way, and your educators will help you with that, kind of setting those goals up, but think about it. There is going to be a length of time for your project, and I really do want for you to understand that when educators prepare these things, a lot more work goes into it than you see. And you'll learn that as you're putting these things together. Normally we put about 4 to 6 hours into one page or one 10-minute piece of instruction for you. And so be prepared for these hours that you're going to be working together. And I think it's about 12 hours that you'll have to work on your presentations just here between the 2 days. You may come out with a 10, maybe 20-minute presentation. And that's all we really want, if that's feasible for you, or less. So in your groups, decide, okay, Walter Reed, we have time for 10 minutes. We can take 10 minutes in unit meetings. Okay, so maybe that's where our limit of our time of our presentation should be. At West Point, maybe, hey, we only get 5. There's no way people are going to do more than that. Maybe we just need to have some kind of a send home packet that they can take. They can have a handout and they can have a little worksheet or puzzle to do with that and bring it back in when they're ready. So think about how you will educate in your facilities and come to a consensus as a group as far as how much time you really think that your coworkers are going to have to take the information in from your presentation. And then be prepared to try to navigate what you choose to do so that it fits within that time frame. It's very, very easy to think about 10 minutes as being very daunting. How am I going to speak for 10 minutes? How am I going to present on anything for 10 minutes? And others will have the opposite problem. How can I just boil down delirium to 10 minutes? I personally just taught a class and it was hard for me to get delirium down to 4 hours. And I still feel like I just skimmed the surface. So these are very broad topics that you're going to be given. Medication in the elderly. My goodness, you could have 3 or 4 different semester-long sessions on that topic alone. But you're maybe thinking about 10 minutes. So just be really specific in your goals or what you want to actually speak about. Think about budget. We know in healthcare, budget is a bigger concern than maybe it has been for a few decades. And for all of us, budgets are an issue even in our homes. And if there's a cost associated, and there will be, with production of your project, even if you decide, I want to give a handout to all of my staff, and then I want to copy a small worksheet or puzzle to go along with that, and then have that collected, there will be a cost. There will be your hours that you will put into it. There will be their hours that they will be expected to put into it. Even if they take it home, they may be wrapping their time and getting paid for that. And so be aware that the expense of not only time, but any creation that has to go on, copying, paper, ink, all of that costs something for your facilities. The cost of your presentations will in large part be absorbed by the facility that's presenting it at that time. So if you want to have a handout that you're going to give out, and there's 100 employees at a certain facility, that handout master will go with your group project to that facility. The educators there will then take it and then make those copies at the facility that is using those handouts. So obviously that facility is going to have to absorb the cost of that part of your presentation. Now if you make a poster that's going to travel from one place to the other, probably that's only going to be a one-time expense, hopefully. That being said, if anything is lost, damaged, or just unreadable anymore because of whatever happens to it, somebody put it in their car and forgot, and the dog got in and it got all muddy, whatever, you'll be responsible for replacement cost. So please be aware that if you choose to leave something in a public area, a lounge area or something like that, put it in a safe place, keep your eyes on it. It looks like it's getting damaged, let somebody know. And as you create these things, if you create something that will travel, like a poster, think about making a master copy of anything you put on the poster and keeping that with you. That way, if a person needs to call you and say, hey, it's Walter Reed and I'm sorry, but we messed up your poster. I don't know what happened, but it got lost or it got wet or something. And we call you and say, can you please send us your master copies of what you had and we'll remake another one. Of course, at Walter Reed's expense. Then that should be something that you want to prepare for. So please plan ahead for every contingency. Educators plan, overplan, know things are going to go wrong, make 2 or 3 different options because they're never going to be choosing the first option the first time anyway. So again, as you think about cost, think about the portability of your project, the durability of your project. Will it hold up? It should look just as good when it gets to the 4th facility as it did when it left here the first time. That being said, your presentation is all about what are you going to cover. And we talked about how these topics are huge. Okay, delirium alone, huge topic. I could talk forever on delirium, and some of you think I have. If you're talking about something like pressure ulcers, also, you could just talk forever on that subject. And you really need to decide as a team today. You'll be given your topic, but you need to decide what is the information that is really critical, most useful to our patients in all of the facilities or to our staff that work in any of these facilities at any level. And then that is what you will present. So that is your core information you're hoping to get across. So please understand, you are boiling these large topics down to a very small amount of information. And that's one of the things your group needs to decide on. It is very, very easy to have what we call scope creep. So the scope of your project is the information you choose to present during that. And I'll give you an example of delirium because I just finished working on that project here for Walter Reed as a pilot program. And we started on med-surg, and that became huge probably within the 2nd week. It was, well, are we going to expand it to ER? How about PACU? What about patients who are coming in as outpatients? So what do we do about patient education and family education? And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at a certain point, as a group, we did have to say, nope, we're not going to go beyond this wall, this boundary of information or what we're covering right now in this project, because it's just not feasible to bite off more than you can chew, so to speak. So be prepared. These things grow much more easily than you think they do, and it can happen when you're not looking. So avoid the scope creep. Decide again how you're going to present it. Talk amongst yourselves. What is the best way to do this? Is it going to be a PowerPoint presentation at a unit meeting, at an in-service? Is it going to be a take-home presentation that you prepare a workbook or worksheet? Is it going to be more an informal chat session that you have, maybe over a snack break or something with your coworkers? So anything that you come up with, just decide how that will look. Try it out with each other and see, is this going to work at all the different facilities? And we'll talk about that as your educators help you in your groups as you move forward. We do have some templates that you can choose from for your education plan. So educators sit down and get a topic, and we really do bang our heads against walls and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do it? Is it going to be a classroom? Is it going to be a take-home? Is it going to be an online module? Is it going to be a combination of all those things? Is it going to be hands-on? Is it going to be a lab experience? And it can just be very frustrating as an educator to figure out what's best for a group and how that's going to look and how much time it's going to take. I'm not expecting you to have to do that because it takes years and years, and even now if I get a topic, I'm still frustrated and I'm still asking people, I don't know, what should we do about this? This is a new piece in SORI and it's driving me crazy and I don't know how to get this out there. And so this is really made for you, and your educators will show you the templates to choose from, and it's kind of really just plug in your information. It's really just kind of a plug and play situation where you're just going to fill in the blanks and then follow the directions. And we'll kind of go into that. You won't be alone when you get to developing your lesson plans. Estimate how much time, again, overestimate how much time you think it's going to take. Be prepared to make changes even at the last minute. There's some times when I think that I've got all day, or I think I'm going to get everybody at this unit meeting, no problem. I'm going to have 5 unit meetings today, and I'm going to see pretty much 90% of the staff, because everybody's going to come in for these unit meetings. Yeah, right. Census goes up, there's a flu epidemic in town, and I get 3 people that come to the total of 5 meetings. Well, there goes my education. Nobody got the education. So I've got to rethink very quickly how that's going to happen. I get the luxury of being able to say, all right, let me go back to my office and rethink this and come back the next week and do it again. You guys have 2 days, so please plan at least 2 alternatives, because somewhere, somehow, between now and March, something will go wrong, and you will want to fall back on the alternative that your group came up with. And we'll talk more about that too. But be prepared for that. Scope, again, avoid the scope creep. Do not get too complex. Use the KISS method. Keep it short and simple. Please make sure that you are making this information accessible to all audiences. So if you have a group of workers that are primarily made up of nursing assistants, very, very valuable group of people, and we need them to know everything that they can do to help their patients, us, and to be the best staff they can be. But they may not be prepared to understand the intricacies of dosing anticholinergic medications. They have not had that education before. So you do not want to talk over the level of understanding or responsibility that the people you're presenting to will have. So as you're planning all of this, please keep in mind that you really want to keep this as general as you need to, so that it can provide the most information possible and the most help and good for our patients. So CNAs, they do not deliver medication the same way that the nurses do, at least not here in acute care in all cases. And so in medication, we may not talk about all anticholinergics. We may briefly touch on that, but we may really want to talk about specific side effects that you may see and what needs to be reported quickly to a nurse or to a physician, and how that looks in elderly patients. And so those are things. Will it affect your I's and O's? Maybe CNAs will pick up on that a lot sooner than nursing will, because they have a lot more to do with those brief changes and whatnot. So those are information that's information that they're going to need. So think about that. Also, remember to speak so everyone understands you. You don't want to talk like a professor. If you do, some people are just going to tune you out immediately. And I find that often happens to me. I'll use a couple of words and I'll notice my audience is just sort of staring through me. And then you know, okay, wait a minute, I have to bring this down to a much more realistic and much more informal kind of a venue. Setting objectives. Objectives is one of the hardest things for educators to learn how to do. We absolutely hate this part of our jobs and of our education process. And believe me, there are whole classes dedicated to hours and hours and hours of teaching you how to write an objective. I do not need you to go there. But we do want to get you used to using the objective format just to outline the information that you do want to present. If you don't know what you're going to talk about, chances are you're not going to talk about that when you get there. So this is for you to say, this is exactly what I want them to know. I want them to know 2 things that cause delirium in the elderly. I want them to know 3 risk factors of developing a pressure ulcer. Those things are going to come across in your presentation, and so this is where you set the stage. You set the stage for yourself, for your other educators who are going to be presenting your project when you're not there, and for the people who are going to be listening to your presentation. I do want you to make 2 objectives. Again, this will be in your worksheets that I give you, so again, it's a plug and play kind of a thing. You're just going to fill in the blank, and the objectives will be there for you magically. So it's not going to be as hard as you think it is, but I do want to just sort of say, anybody who's ever been to school, and we all have, you've read these before. These are those boring things that come at the beginning of any program or PowerPoint, and they usually say something that's so boring, we skip right past it. And it's like, the student will be able to identify 3 medications that make elderly crawl the walls and think there's snakes in their beds. Okay, it's not going to sound like that, but it always starts out pretty much the same. It starts out with a verb, there's a condition, and there's an acceptable level of performance. I want you to tell what the person's going to do, how they're going to do it, and how are you going to know they're doing it right. An example might be the employee will correctly list at least 2 risk factors for developing delirium without looking at the presentation handout. So you have who's going to do it, the employee, what are they going to do? They're going to list, it's a verb. Ethlyn was saying objectives start with verbs. They're going to list, what are they going to list? 2 risk factors for delirium, and how are they going to do it without looking at the presentation handout? That's your goal. That's what you want them to get. So when you present, you're not going to present on medications that make delirium better, because they're not going to get to listing 2 risk factors. You're going to present risk factors that they're going to remember. So that's kind of how that works. So again, please don't freak out yet. It's all going to come to you, I promise. So writing objectives first for behavior, again, a verb. List, understand, state, identify, describe, solve, operate, recall. All of those kind of boring things students have to do. Under which conditions? Given a set of number without the use of or at the conclusion of the presentation. Very often these are things that are already kind of in the sentence, like after the presentation, the student will list 3 medications that cause delirium in the elderly. And then the acceptance of the level of acceptable performance, again, successfully with 90% proficiency. I think successfully is probably a pretty generic one, everyone can get behind. The student will successfully recall what causes the rainforest to die, whatever the case may be. So by the end of the presentation, the learner will successfully state at least 3 medications that are considered high risk for elderly patients. Again, just your 3 parts of your objectives. Don't do more than you have to do. Here's a hint. I want you to take really, really to heart, because this is going to make your job so much easier. Because you know that all that niche GRN stuff was online. You remember when we did all those 20 hours, 16 hours of online stuff? What was at the beginning of all those presentations? Objectives. And there's a presentation on every one of the topics we're going to discuss. So go to the niche website and find, say, delirium. They have about 10 objectives already written for you.
I actually have printouts.
And she's already got them printed out for you to use in your groups later. I'm going to provide some laptops for you later on in the day too, so you can get to those websites. So please, don't do more work than you have to. Feel free, if you feel confident and want to, go off of the list that the niche place is already given for you. But if you don't want to, and your presentation will be covered by the objectives that are already created, just use what they've done. That's what it's there for. That's the resource for you as niche educators. Learners must evaluate themselves, and they can. You don't have to put a test up there for your people to finish after you present, just to make sure that they've learned what you hope they learn. I would do a very simple evaluation of the presentation, or simply evaluate them through a discussion format, or question and answer review quiz game, or handout that maybe they give back to you later. And we'll talk about all the different methods that you can use to evaluate or assess how successful they were at getting the information that you were presenting. And that's a part of every educational process. We have to show that we've made a difference. And sometimes the data will take a longer time to get to us. So in other words, because your health system, your facility, your managers are trusting us with the job of educating our peers and to elevate the level of care that we give our patients. Say we are discussing prevention of pressure ulcers. It may take 3-4 months before you see the number of pressure ulcers in your facility have gone down. That would be one indicator that you've done your job well. But you also need to show something else. You have to show that what you did was useful, was worth the investment of time, money, materials, staffing that was put into us. So as educators, unfortunately, we do need to evaluate and assess our performance as well. So let your learners do that for you. This is as simple as an evaluation sheet. You get them at the end of almost every in-service you attend here. How well did the instructor perform the instruction? Was the room comfortable? Were you able to get to your materials in a successful manner? So we'll go over that as well. Some methods of instructions, lecturing, what I'm doing now, the most boring, probably the most difficult for people who aren't comfortable as educators. Not a whole lot of people are comfortable with public speaking. I know the first time I had to give any kind of presentation or class, I was shaking so bad you could hear it in my voice. So that's one method, but you don't have to pick that one. Take-home worksheets or workbooks. The people here at Walter Reed are very familiar with my workbooks and worksheets. Roundtable discussions. This is great for adult learners. You have adult learners. They learn differently than children. They need to get back to their lives, and they are taking a very small amount of their day, a precious amount of their time, to sit with you and listen to this. It is extremely useful that they do this because it's going to provide them with education they need to give the best care they can. However, you still have to capture their attention and make it worthwhile for them to be here. Adults want to get to the point quick. Like you're sitting there thinking, Heather, oh my God, you're so boring, just get to it. That's what they're going to think when you're standing there too. So be mindful of that, okay? And I just love table discussions. You're sitting down with somebody and you're saying, LaDonna, have you ever had a patient with delirium? Tell me about that. What do you think caused that? So they took Ambien, and that was the first time they took it. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Ambien and other medications like that. Oh, really? Okay, how about Marion? What about you? Ever had a delirium patient? You kind of see how that goes? It's a much less formal part of your discussion. They're engaged with you, and you are getting information out to them that they didn't have when they walked in the room. So think about that as an option. Hands-on exercises, learning experiences. These are wonderful. This is how you do the things you do. These are very useful when you're introducing equipment or other things like that. But also if you're going to use a mini cognition test like the SIS to work on screening for delirium, you can demonstrate that. You're working on something like activity level in elderly adults. How do you keep their activity up if they're in a wheelchair? Demonstrations, get your people involved, get your learners involved and motivated in the lecture or the material you're presenting. Think about those things as options. Discovery learning, I love that. That's exactly what you're doing right now. You're going to become the teachers. So guess who's going to know more about these topics than anybody else very soon? You all, because nothing says learning like teaching. And that's exactly what you're going to do. And you can do that with the people in your facility. Have them teach each other. We're doing it. We're cheating. And there's so many more. So which method to select? Again, think about what are your strengths? What do your staff members need the most? How are they going to learn the best? How much time do they have to give you? If it's not much, you've got to move fast. If it's none, you've got to have something they can take home. And then think about preparing, as I said, at least 2 methods to do this, because I guarantee at some point one of your plans is going to fall apart. And you're going to need something to fall back on. Have a plan B. Always. Teachers usually bring plan C's, D's, and E's into a classroom, even though you may not see it. An example, again, if you have to do a 20-minute presentation, but there isn't enough time or staff available for whatever reason, you may need to leave a handout or a puzzle for them to complete instead, and just have them put it in a basket, and you come back in a few days and try again, or collect the handouts. That's still education. It's still getting the point across. So have a backup. Be prepared for challenges and plan ahead. It will happen. An example of that, I bring my own clicker. How many times have you Walter Reed people been in these rooms and these clickers don't work?
Yep.
Okay, so I marched my butt to Staples and I bought one. I'm not saying you have to. It's just an example of how I plan ahead. I don't rely on the equipment that might fail. I plan for the equipment to fail and I have a backup. And sometimes even the backup's not enough and I'm drawing on paper because my PowerPoint just isn't playing. Have a poster covering the topic to leave in a lounge or staff common area for the staff to read during their break time is an alternative for the education plan number 1. Maybe your group is going to choose this one. If so, all the pieces are outlined for you. Create a pre-assessment, a handout with 2 or 3 questions about the topic to be presented, a little handout that says, what do you know about medications in the elderly already? If you have an elderly patient, is it safe to give them Benadryl? Why or why not? They don't have to know the answers. You're going to give them the answers, but if you get them thinking about things before you start, it helps to get the creative juices flowing, engages the brain, helps them remember the stuff more. And it also gives you a great thing because when you get to evaluation and assessment, it's the same sheet of paper. You don't have to make two, you're just using the same sheet over again. Maybe you're going to do a presentation, your alternative will be a poster, just in case the staff can't come to the presentation. And then your evaluation or assessment method would be the same handout. Okay, go back through those questions that you answered at the beginning. If there were any you didn't know the answers to, do you now? Was there anything you learned that you thought you knew something but you found out you were not correct? Or you learned more about? Hand in your evaluation sheets at the end and you're done. You've done your pre-assessment, your evaluation all in one handy step. And if you're going to leave something for them to give you later, then make sure you provide some kind of a basket, a place that's designated for them to hand these things in for you. Because you do want to see how the learning went. When we come back, we're not going to be grading you all. Say, oh my gosh, the group from West Point, they just did fantastic and Walter Reed sucked. We're not going to say that. But what we are going to do is when we come back together, we're going to say, what were the challenges you found? What are the opportunities to get better? As we go into moving forward, is this format going to work for us? Did it work for acute care but not for long term? Is there something PACE should be brought into more than they were this time? Those are all questions we're going to be asking, and if you don't know how your learners responded to you or if they learned what you were presenting, then you don't have the feedback that you need to get better and to do this differently. Education plan 2, again, we'll kind of go into this in your groups with your educators. This might be something that you choose. This one involves asking the group to think about an occasion they had to deal with a patient with an issue. So think about a time when you had to deal with a patient with a very extensive set of pressure ulcers, and you weren't sure what you were going to do about it. And then they're thinking and getting their creative juices flowing. You're setting up your presentation. Maybe you have a couple of talking points or case studies together. The Niche and GRN website already has multiple case studies for every one of your area. You don't have to make them up. They're done for you. Your alternative presentation might be a handout with your talking points and maybe a crossword puzzle. There are free websites that create crossword puzzles in about 5 minutes. All you need to do is type in your clue and type in your word and it'll make it for you. Print it out, copy it, that's it, you're done. It's your alternative. The evaluation or assessment could be your puzzle that you handed out, or maybe you put in a separate evaluation form right at the end and you have them fill that out. Again, make sure you have a basket or some place to collect these things later. Education Plan 3, your last and final choice, is a KWL chart, which would be your pre-assessment. That's a chart of 3 columns. The first column is what I know, the second column is what I want to learn, and the third one is what I did learn. So you have them fill out the first 2 columns as your pre-assessment in your first 5 minutes while you're getting warmed up for your presentation. Maybe you create a workbook or you have a hands-on activity or demonstration as your 2 methods of presentation, your first method and your alternate. And then at the end, have them fill out that last part, what I learned column, and hand it in to you. Now you've done your assessment, your evaluation, and you've done your presentation. And any other incarnations of any of that that you want to think of. If you are extremely creative, you don't have to use what I've set up for you. You can go off of the template. That's totally fine. And I encourage you to do that. Some people might not feel comfortable this time around, but maybe next time we do something, you'll have a different idea. Use games. Games, puzzles. It sounds stupid. Adults love them. Love to be engaged, love to be challenged, hate to be bored. Nurses generally of the ADHD variety. This is why we are in jobs where we never see the same thing twice. We can't anticipate what's going to happen. The truth is, we love the chaos. If we didn't, we wouldn't be here. Sometimes it's frustrating, but that's why we're not people in a factory cutting lipstick tubes all day long for 8 hours a day. We're just not the people who can do that. So, give them something to challenge their mind, keep them active, and keep them engaged. So think about your group. But don't make it too hard. They're tired. They worked 12 hours, maybe 5 shifts in a row. And they've got families and they're in school. So think about that too. Fun, simple, fast, but informative. Your facility administration team will work with you to determine the best way to deliver this. So you're going to come up with the way you're going to actually present. And then, as Ethlyn said, you're going to negotiate a time, a space for you to actually do this. You don't have to walk into your facility and say, oh, all my nurses are never going to come together for an in-service. Sit down with your manager and decide, can we do an in-service? Is there already an in-service planned where I could tack a 10-minute presentation on delirium right onto the end of it? Is there a unit meeting already scheduled, a staff meeting where we could present this? Do you normally do your education in a like a mosquito or newsletter format? Can you add an extra page to it? Let your manager help you to provide this to your staff, that they know what is expected of you and they're willing to be there and they're part of your team. Also, you want to determine the point of contacts between facilities, and the administration will help you with that as well. So you see on your little bubble chart, you're supposed to get something from I think it's Walter Reed to West Point, and then West Point to Saluda, and the little bubbles. Okay, so I tried to make sure that when we came up with this, we were kind of geographically, we're all in the Middle Peninsula, but we're kind of geographically close. In your facility, maybe your administrator knows that one of you lives right next to one of these facilities and can contact that person, or have you contact that person and say, you know what, on October 24th, I need this poster driven over to this facility. Are you willing to help me out with that? Let your administration guide you with some of these things too. You don't have to do everything yourself. There are people who will help you. But you still will be taking responsibility for receiving the newest presentation and then figuring out how you're going to set that up for the next person, for the next group in your facility. For ease of transport, as you develop these things, think about making it as portable, durable, and maybe electronic. So if you make a handout, make sure you make it in electronic form if you can. If you make a crossword puzzle, scan it in so that you can be emailed to someone else in a facility, and then we don't have to even drive it over. But don't let the transportation issue keep you from making something that you will actually physically transport from place to place. That's still an option. It's a good option. Remember, your facility is responsible for replacing any materials that are lost, damaged, stolen, eaten by dogs, whatever. Keep your projects clean, neat, and in good condition. They really should look the same in March as they do right now when we make them. Helpful websites for you. There are some really great ones. The most important one is going to be a niche website. You all had access to it when you became involved in the training program. You went in there with your emails and you had to log on your passwords. They are still active accounts. So you will simply go to the website as I listed there, go to my account, and I'll show you this on the computer again today. And you'll put in all your password information again. If you don't remember, you can reset your password. And you'll be able to access the instructor materials for the GRN and the GPCA programs to be able to use. So again, the case studies, the handouts, the PowerPoint presentations, they're all there for you. And you can use them. A word about plagiarism, please don't copy the PowerPoint slides and put them under your name. That's not honest. It's okay to use the niche program materials as they are, as long as you give credit for who actually created them, because they are for our use as niche facilities. We do own the license that allows us to use those materials. Puzzle Maker, discoveryeducation.com, word search makers. These teacher sites have fantastic little apps and you just plug your information in. It makes you word searches and crossword puzzles and matchings and fill in the blanks, and you can feel like an elementary school teacher too. And they're pretty cool. and good free clip arts, things like that if you want to get really creative, if you're kind of the artistic creative type. National Institutes of Health, fantastic handouts and information that you can use for free on there as well. And then of course if you Google anything, you're going to find something. So I actually typed in delirium games last night, got like 1 million games that you can play with people, nurses, to teach delirium. So it's probably out there. Okay, so my next one I actually didn't want to show you too quickly. All right, so if you bear with me a little bit longer, I do have a couple little digressions and stories, and we do have time, so I'm gonna fill it because this is my plan B. Okay, so I wouldn't normally let you see this, but because you're going to be educators very soon, back 2 hours from now, I want you to know kind of how this process works a bit. So Janet Ethlin and I and Edna Garcia were involved, and we decided we wanted to put on this presentation, and we said, well, we've got X amount of time. We want to do this in the morning between the ceremony and lunch. We tried to figure out who wanted to say what group we were going to go, and oh, there were meetings, there was emails, it was crazy. I was even here at 6 o'clock this morning still adding slides and things to my email presentation, or in my email to put in the presentations, and we were typing away here as you walked in. And that's just how it kind of goes sometimes. Now yours is going to be so much more organized, that's not going to happen. But for me, that's what happened this morning. So we actually have a lot of time to kill. Luckily for you, I prepared 2 really boring stories that I'm going to throw into the presentation that I could have taken out of the presentation and skipped through if I had been running short on time. So depending on how quickly the ceremony took, or how slowly that went, then you know, you kind of tailor things. You always have a backup. You have things that you can throw away if you don't need it, and you have things that you can add if you do. So this is my additions. I hope you enjoy them. Okay, so 1, if you know me, you know that I tend to drone on and on and on, and I'm not a brief person. But my very favorite quote by Shakespeare is actually, brevity is the soul of wit, meaning if you can say it in as few words as possible, you're probably smarter than the guy who talks for an hour about the same topic. And that's so true. So I'm going to challenge you today because you have a huge topic, and I'm saying 10 minutes, seriously? 10 minutes for delirium? Oh my God, I can't do it. Yes, you can. When I was in school, okay, 3 boring stories. When I was in school, boring story number 1, most of the time our teachers would say things like, I want you to write a 3-page paper on F. Scott Fitzgerald. Right? All the other students would go, 3 pages on that boring dead guy? Oh no. Okay, and that's the nice way. They really wouldn't say that, but okay. Me, I would say, because I'm a nerd, and I'm not afraid to admit it, I would say, how am I going to get it down to only 3 pages? Are you serious? And my teachers would kind of go, yes, Heather, 3 pages, maybe 2 for you, okay? It was always a challenge for me. I'm a wordy girl. I come from New York. We talk. That's the way it is. Okay. So, challenge is actually, you think right now 10 minutes, I can't fill 10 minutes. Challenge really, even though you don't know it yet, is how am I going to talk for only 10 minutes? It really will become that way for you, even though you probably don't believe it right now. Okay, second boring story, Abraham Lincoln. You're going to say, what the heck does Abraham Lincoln have to do with this? But he does. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln was asked to take some time out of his busy schedule and come up to a battlefield in a place called Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. They had had a big battle there, and they needed to do something with all the bodies. They didn't want to transport the bodies all over hither and yon, using up all the expensive railroad traffic and facilities, so they decided to bury them right there, consecrate the battlefield as a cemetery, because after all, who the heck's going to live there after the battle anyway? And it was all just a bunch of old farmland nobody wanted to start with, so good idea. Let's invite the president to come and talk. Somebody had a great idea, and he decided, sure, I'll come to Gettysburg. At the time, okay, believe it or not, people actually had jobs giving speeches. They were called orators. The orators made money giving speeches because they spoke so well. Also at the time, most of the time, important people like presidents wrote their own speeches. That's important because right now, probably none of the presidents for the past 50 years have written a single speech that they've given by themselves. They have speechwriters for that now. Lincoln never did that. He was a smart guy. He knew how to write. He could do it. So, it's on the train. He has not written a single word. People are getting really worried. Dude, you've got to write a speech in about 5 hours. What are you going to do? Okay, he gets out a napkin. Some people say it's a napkin. Some people doubt the validity of that story and jots down a few things and says, I'm good, I'm done. Nobody believes it. They're really worried. The old man's maybe losing his mind. It's been a long war. He's tired. Things are not going well. Okay, so fast forward to the day of the Gettysburg Address. Hundreds of people have shown up to the Gettysburg battlefield ready to hear all of the speakers. The speakers that day had been hired specifically because of their talents to give a speech. At the time, the standard speech was about an hour and a half long. That was what was expected of the crowd. If you gave a speech less than that, they were very unhappy with you. They came to hear the speech. Most of the time now, we hear a speech, we think, get on with it. Not then. They think, oh good, I'm glad I came to hear this guy talk. They hire one speaker, and he's the foremost speaker in the nation at the time. We don't even know his name now because he's that unmemorable. He delivered a speech somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 hours, basically saying, we're so sad, this war's gone on, what a horrible battle, we consecrate this ground in the name of justice and all this good stuff, right? Okay, then Abraham Lincoln stands up. He gives a 15-minute speech that hardly anybody even had time to remember what it was about. And he sits down, and everyone is shocked. He's done. That's it. The next day the papers come out. They are so critical of him and his very short speech. He clearly didn't think about what he wanted to say. This is one of the most famous speeches in history. He managed to boil down what the person before him took 2 hours to say in 15 minutes. And in fact, school children today have to memorize that speech, much to their chagrin, because it's so good. So I will say that probably the smartest people know how to keep things short. I obviously don't. All right, we still got some time to kill. Third boring story. Ernest Hemingway. This all really does have a point, I promise. Ernest Hemingway is an American novelist. You've probably all been forced to read some of his drivel, as you probably thought of it in high school, back in high school. Okay, very famous American novelist, pretty much beginning of the early 20th century. Started out as a newspaperman, so most of his stories were short. His novels were extremely short. And as I said, back then people expected length. Okay, they didn't have internet, they didn't have to get places fast. They had time, they wanted to fill it. So most of the novels at the time are about yay thick. Hemingway's were probably very thin, considered brochures even. He was criticized for it, although some people did think he was a genius in his time, and one newspaperman is doing an article about him and interviewing him and challenges him. Can you come up with a story in 6 words? That's pretty short, right? Hemingway thinks about it. A few minutes later, so the legend goes, he comes up with this. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. That's a story. That's not a happy story, but that's a story. Hemingway boiled down his thoughts to 6 words. This actually led a blogger who runs smithmagazine.com blog to think, can we do this? Can we boil our thoughts, memoirs, down to 6 words? And there are 6 words biographies, and I encourage you to go to smith.com because you'll find them and you can share your own. This was one of Hemingway's stories. These are some of my favorites. It all changed in an instant. That's her biography in 6 words. You can imagine her life. Something happened. Life is better in soft pajamas. That's a 3rd grader. That's perfect. Isn't that just life? It is better in soft pajamas, by golly. Robin Templeton, a writer after Harvard, had baby with crackhead. Okay? Not all the biographies are happy. Isabel Lara, my life made my therapist laugh. Good one. Peter Lou, Army or jail? I chose wrong. I spelled chose wrong. I'm sorry. Amy Tan. Amy Tan, I don't know how many of you know her. She's a novelist, famous now. I think that she is an Asian American writer, and probably Joy Luck Club is one of her most famous. She's very prolific, and even my children read her Sagwa, the Siamese Chinese cat, all the time. Hers was former boss, writing's your worst skill. She won the Pulitzer. Probably not a good boss. Mine, every day as a nurse, is more time, more money, more people. That can be our chant at Riverside sometimes. What's yours? How would you boil your life, your day, your thoughts about my boring presentation into 6 words? So, this actually all does have a point, because I'm going to challenge you to boil down delirium, medications in the elderly, and yada yada into a very brief 10-minute presentation today. Try to get your life into 6 words, and you'll see it's harder than you think, but it's also fun. And I think you can do it. So, your assignment, and why you have an index card on your table, is as you break for lunch today, which will be in a little bit, think about how are you going to sum up your thoughts in 6 words. Would it be need margarita, day was really bad? Would it be nurse, teacher, always best job ever? So think about what you would put. I want you to just bring those back after lunch, and you're going to share them just in your small groups. So you start to get to know each other a little bit. Maybe explain a little bit about why you wrote what you did. Hopefully there won't be any profanity, but we're all grown up, so do what you got to do. I do want to just mention that there are some tips that I've talked about for educators that you should take. Please rely on that GRN and niche website. It has so many resources for you. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many other educators in the room, and you will have them travel with you for the next couple of days through your project, and then be available for you to gather. My biggest tip for you was be prepared and plan for change, because it will happen.